Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to our webcast on project forecasting from the perspective of an earned value management system and the EIA-748. In prior webinars, we've covered the basics of earned value, and today we're going to dig a little deeper into project forecasting. I'm Richard Hayden with Unanet, and I'm here today with Paul Bollinger, Engagement Director with Humphreys & Associates. Humphreys & Associates have been recognized as leading experts in EVMS for over 3 decades. I think I first met and worked with Gary Humphreys, President and CEO of Humphreys & Associates, in about 1990. So Paul is going to present the content here today, but before we get started, I want to cover a couple of housekeeping items for you. We want you to submit any questions you have throughout the webcast via the GoToWebinar dialog on the right of the screen, and we'll answer those questions if we have time at the end, or follow up by email afterwards if more appropriate. And you'll also receive a copy of this presentation and the recording within 48 hours. So to start, we'd like to have a poll to get a sense of how many of you are exposed to formal earned value according to EIA-748. Jess, can you launch our poll?
I sure can. Here we go.
So there's 3 answers. Please pick one. Yes, no, or it's okay to say what is EIA-748, and hopefully in this webinar we'll explain a little bit more about that.
Yep. All right, Richard, let's take a look at the poll results here. Pretty mixed bag. So we had 30% say yes, 20% said no, and then 50% said, what is EIA-748? And hopefully by the end of the webinar, we've got that down.
Okay, well, that gives you a little bit of context. So at this point, I will hand over to Paul.
Well, good afternoon. Humphreys & Associates is a consulting company really dealing with projects and project management. Don't let it scare you that it's headquartered in Irvine, California. I personally have never been to the office in 30 years. So I live in Virginia. That's why I was invited in to do this meeting here today. So I drove in just to make sure that my internet wouldn't mess things up. So EIA-748 is really, it's just a standard. If you saw it, if you ever looked at it, you'd kind of giggle because it has 32 motherhood statements about what a good project management system should be capable of doing. From those guidelines, people develop requirements and eventually design their system and implement it to meet those guidelines. So it's very loose at the top and very tight at the bottom. By the time you actually have a system developed and looked at by your customers, you will have proven that you know about all the guidelines, how they work, and how you would handle your system. Now, the application for EIA-748 is government-wide, and it's really supposed to be applied to capital procurements larger than $20 million. As you can imagine, most of those fall in the first 2 areas. They're the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy. But I myself have had engagements with companies that work in the biological area, or they do software. A recent one was software for Social Security Administration, and one even software for the Department of State. So you are liable to run into EIA-748 requirements all over the government, and also as a subcontractor. So you might not have a direct relationship with the government, but if your subcontract is large enough, it can have earned value requirements. Today's topic is forecasts in the earned value world. And I just wanted to differentiate, make sure we focus on the forecasts that we handle. The blue triangles, the blue line is the going out of business line from your sold work. It's your project plans and your project forecasts going out into the future. And if you won no more business, none of the green ever happened, eventually you would run out of work to do and you'd close up shop. So we only deal with that. This is not forecasting for winds or forecasting any of that. It's just forecasting for existing projects. Let's isolate it a little bit more. The exact forecast that we're going to talk about is what might be called the spending forecast. If you see there on the left, where work is performed and costs are incurred, that's the type of forecast that we talk about. Of course, there's others. You know, our customers are all keenly interested in when is the bill going to arrive, so there's an invoicing forecast. And then, of course, there's, for cash flow and other purposes, there's a payment forecast. But we're really focused in on the spending forecast. So when is work going to happen and how much is it going to cost? There's other things to think about, but we, you know, just for today, we'll just say that most of the time you will not find an earned value requirement on a fixed price contract or subcontract. It can happen, particularly if you look at all those risk statements right there. If the customer considers it to be risky, it's possible that you can get earned value requirements on a fixed price job. Most of the time, it's either cost plus. Recently, I've had a spate of fixed price incentive and one fixed price award fee type customer. So I don't know whether, you know, my experience is limited to what I run into, but I don't know if it's morphing in that direction or it just was the way it came out, but I was surprised. What we want to talk about when we talk to people about project management is, you know, why bother? So, well, why bother is what can go wrong. So I just highlighted in red those items that are directly involved in or affected by a project forecast. And I can tell right away I should have made the first one red too. Because if you're not communicating your forecast, you're not telling people when the project is going to end and how much it's going to cost. So that one should have been red too. Poor change control or scope creep. If you're letting work come into the project for which you're not going to be reimbursed, you're going to have a problem. Inaccurate estimates, constant problem everywhere we go. Setting aside something like buying in, this is really more dealing with just not getting the right estimate in the right place. And so there are things, ways when we delve into the earned value world that we can help develop better cost estimates. Lately, the last few years, there's been a big push to integrate risk and opportunity management into the earned value planning and certainly into earned value forecasting. So now when you're looking at a project forecast in the earned value world, it's based on risks and opportunities, and it has to be. And their part in that forecast has to be explained. Just like poor estimating of budgets, poor duration estimates are a big problem. And while they don't immediately affect cost, you can see clearly that they would, but they also do drive the forecast. As time pushes out and you apply rates to your forecasted efforts, the values of things change. And then a real problem is inadequate resource forecasting. And that really means not knowing whether the resources you need are going to be available at the right time, the time you need them. And if you don't go that far, you're going to have surprises. So this is resource forecasting in terms of availability and then also in terms of cost. When we talk about an earned value management system, we always make sure that people understand our view of the world is that the project manager is responsible for organizing, planning, directing, and controlling all of the resources assigned to the project to meet the goals. So while this is always going on, organizing, planning, directing, most of our time is spent in management control. It's the same everywhere in the world. Control is measure, analyze, act. Six Sigma world, measure, analyze, act. So our project forecast is part of this. It's really part of the measurement, and then it becomes part of the analysis so that we can take appropriate action. So beefing up or sitting under the process of management is the earned value management system. So the earned value management system is really there to help us as managers perform those steps of organizing, planning, directing, and controlling, and a lot of it is focused at controlling. So, an earned value management system is like driving, looking in the rearview mirror. They just don't understand. We have a lot of information that we collect in terms of measurements, but it's all collected for the purpose of being able to look forward and make a decent forecast about what's going to happen. So we only have it so that we can look out the front window and see where we're headed. Now, a system is made up of policies, procedures, tools, and people. And the policies and procedures are those explanations of how an earned value management system is going to work. This picture right here is a common tool set. You can see that we glue together or bring together an integrated master schedule tool, Microsoft Project being the most common. We have tools that operate on the schedule that aren't actually built in. They come along beside it. Might be a risk register, might be a probabilistic simulator for schedule risk. In the middle, we have the earned value engine where the plan comes together with the resource loading, with rates, and estimates are turned into full dollar values. So that's where our estimate really comes out of when we think of it in terms of dollars or hours. We think of it in terms of dollars. Comes out of an engine, but it got there through a schedule. And then in a full earned value implementation, of course, we need to marry up costs from labor and procurement subcontractors to get a full picture of what's going on. Sticking out over there at the right is an analysis analytics tool. There are a couple, and actually the EV engine itself for project has an array of analysis tools also, trying to make better usage of the information that we collect. So that's the scheme. If you said, wow, I want to set up an earned value management system, you're really looking at the policies and procedures, and then in the heart of it is establishing something that looks like this and getting it to work. We deal with every element of cost when we deal in the earned value world. Most of the time people are focused on the labor, but in reality, material is an expensive and critical piece of a contract. The indirect is often more than half the total value. And if you have subcontracts, these are major subcontracts when you see it in the earned value world. These are large subcontracts with the potential of needing earned value applied to them themselves. So we have to have methods of dealing with every element of cost and forecasting every element of cost. So the forecast is a complicated beast if it involves time, labor, material, subcontracts, rates, all of that brought into one picture of the future for our project. You can see it gets a little complicated. The forecast is one element of what we look at in the earned value system. We have the planned value, which is really our baseline. That's developed through the schedule again for all the elements of cost. We have the earned value, evaluation of how much of that plan has been accomplished, and we have our spent. And you could say in a way that's kind of looking through the rearview mirror. But where we're really headed is the forecast. That's going to tell us when this project ends or when this task ends, how much this task or this project is going to cost, and the estimation of various players on the project. So the picture looks like this. You have value running up the side and time across the bottom. And notice that time now, our actual costs have been accumulated, and that's a cumulative curve for actual costs. When we go to make an estimate of the future, we always depart from time now. We consider the remaining work, and we try to develop the value estimate for that remaining work across time. So that estimate to complete is the value of that work across time. And when we train people to do this, that is described as the detailed step-by-step plan to get from here to the end. So it's detailed step-by-step plan to get from here to the end, existing in the project schedule and in the project earned value engine. At the right, you can see when we're done, that's the estimated completion date, and the EAC stands for estimate at complete, the total estimated cost at completion. So what we spent plus what we're going to spend according to our forecast yields the total spend for the project, and it ends on the estimated completion date. Not so simple nowadays. We're not happy with just one forecast. Our customers require for projects of this size that we provide best case, worst case, and most likely forecasts. So usually those are derived by departing from the bottoms-up forecast provided by the folks on our team. And the departure takes the form of accepting risk and booking opportunities, or saying risks aren't going to happen and opportunities are. So if you said to yourself, wow, what's the worst case? Well, no opportunities happen and every risk is realized. That would be the worst. What's the best case? Well, none of the risks happen and every opportunity we have comes true. So those could be the far extent of the estimates. Now, no one would get away with doing it that simplistically, but you can see how they might be developed. And if you look at the three red ovals there, the middle one is the most likely. The middle one is usually a statement of the detailed step-by-step plan to get from now till the end. So when the team develops that plan, we don't have to accept it totally, but usually we're very close to accepting it because it has thoughts behind it, not just looking at what could happen after that, but the thoughts in developing that plan. Now, there's one thing on this chart I wanted to draw your eyes to. There's a line called IEAC, Independent Estimate at Complete. And basically it says, you know what? If nothing changed for the performance that we've experienced up till now, this is where we would end up. And you can see that in this case that we drew here, if nothing changed, that project would actually end up higher than the most likely and lower than the worst case. So in order to get to our most likely, we have to change behavior, some amount. And so we're going to be looking, when we're managing these projects, looking for that change. When's it going to happen? Where's it coming from? How can I bend that line to come down to something other than continuing as is, unless I'm doing really well? Okay, so this is the endpoint picture of an earned value system. And you can tell by the size of the stuff on the right of time now, we're not looking out the back rearview mirror. We're looking forward constantly. So how often do we do this? Well, believe it or not, there's a requirement for an annual comprehensive bottoms-up project estimate. Annual, usually people do it on the annual anniversary of the original baseline. Seems to make sense. I put my baseline in place April of 2019. Come April of 2020, I'm going to go back and look at full forecast. Well, if we're doing monthly updates to that, what's the point of doing the annual comprehensive? The real problem is that when you're doing a monthly update, everyone remains focused on the near term, this month and next month usually. If you've ever heard the term 60-day look ahead, well, you know what's going on. People are focused on the next 60 days, not the next 2 years. And so every once in a while, you need to stop and say, what's going to happen after? So we do it every month. We do an annual. And then if something happens on the project, we could forecast it. Where do we do it? Well, we do it at the bottom. This picture is trying to describe what a control account is. Now, a control account is an earned value piece of work that's at the bottom of the work breakdown structure. In this case, it's part of the stator assembly, and it's assigned to mechanical design for responsibility. So we know who's going to be responsible for it and what piece of the product it is. And then you notice in the box, you're looking at work packages, planning packages. Let's just say those are very detailed cuts of the scope, schedule, and budget. So that's the very low level at which an earned value system operates, and particularly at the level at which the estimate is performed. Remember, all elements of cost performed at that low level with the ability to add the answer up to the total contract or into the organization. We always begin by making sure that everything we need to do is in that schedule. If the schedule drives the forecast, all the work has to be in the schedule. There are mechanisms for doing that. There are requirements to do that. So we also want to make sure while we're looking that we don't find unauthorized scope creep in our plan, something which we're going to do that we shouldn't be doing. We also want to make sure that since we put a lot of effort into corrective action planning, that the corrective actions are in the plan that's going to be estimated. And then it's always three parts: scope, schedule, and budget. And when we're looking at the scope, a lot of times we're dealing with people that don't exactly understand the technical portion of the project. And so we want to make sure in our forecast, if there's any impact to the technical performance measures. Are we still going to get the product that we started out to get? And how much is that product going to cost? And when am I going to get that product? So we can't leave it out. Scope, schedule, and budget. And this is verifying the scope. Where does it all begin with scope? Well, it begins in the Work Breakdown Structure Dictionary, which is part of an earned value management system. It's a detailed description, usually of that thing called the control account. So there might be 50 of these, 20 of them, or large projects I've worked on, 500, 600 different control accounts, each one defined in the dictionary. So we're trying to nail down the scope so that we can plan it, earn it, and forecast it. So it's a very detailed kind of process that you would think, it chews up time and chews up effort, but it does, but it comes out with a product by which we all can understand the scope in our project. Risks are important. They're more important nowadays than they ever have been. Recent changes to customer reviews and checklists and things like that have been asking for more and more risk information in the schedule and in the earned value system. We want to know, has anyone done a risk analysis? Have we established any kind of mitigations? What are we going to do about those risks? Are they in the plan? Are they going to be estimated? There's a unique thing we do called the schedule risk analysis. We're not going to have time today to dive into this, but it's a very detailed Monte Carlo process for running analysis, multiple iterations, thousands of iterations of the project to see what's going to happen in the future based on the inputs that we give it. So it's a real test of our forecast. And then in addition to risks, do we know what the opportunities are? So we're asked to maintain a risks and opportunities list and a risks and opportunities management system. Those come together when you're going to make a forecast. They have to be included. IPMR, I'm sorry I left a buzzword in there. That's the Integrated Program Management Report. So that's the main output from an earned value system, customer-oriented output. DID stands for Data Item Description. So this is just telling us, what is the customer requiring? Now they're requiring that the EAC has to consider risks, opportunities, risk reduction plans, known risks, and probable future conditions that could affect the schedule of the project. And anything that you decide here, that you talk about, that you include in your forecast, needs to be explained in what's called a Format 5, which is really just the written project managers, program managers monthly report. So imagine that report saying, this is where we are, here's where we're going, here's how we're going to get there, Here's the risks and opportunities that we considered when we boldly made that statement. Here's where we're going to get. So it's a nice written explanation of your thought process. How did you achieve this forecast? That report I put on one format. And the reason I put that one format on here was just so you can see about halfway down over on the left-hand side in red, the estimated cost at completion. It says this is the management estimate. And there's three: best case, worst case, and most likely. That's what's expected to be turned in to see if the project is going to come in on cost or over, under, whatever. And notice just a couple spaces to the right is a signature block. And that signature is supposed to be of the responsible person, usually the project manager. So the project manager is signing this report saying, hey, everything I'm telling you here is true to the best of my knowledge, and based on that knowledge, I'm going to tell you the best case, worst case, and most likely outcomes for this project. If you want to know more, read the written report. So this is for real. This is an exact example of how it's supposed to work. Oops. Trying to get it to roll forward. There we go. If you do risk management, you're familiar with this. In dealing with risks, you have choices. After you've identified a risk and sized it and you're trying to decide what to do with it, we're particularly interested in the mitigate, because that requires the detailed resource plan of how we're going to mitigate that. So that would be part of the estimate. Now, other things from this chart might fall in there into the estimate, but the one we're really focused on is the detailed plan to get to the end. So much so that there's a requirement that all risk tasks be included in our project schedule. And so this is just a little piece of a project schedule showing in red a column identifying back to the risk register if there's a risk associated with any of these tasks. Now, so that you don't think I'm cheating, I filtered for the tasks that did have risks associated with them. I think this is a test schedule. It had maybe 50 activities, and so these were the ones that had risks associated with it. So it's a handy tool. When you start to make a forecast, you want to have this turned on to see where the risks are, where do they lay in time, what do they affect. So this is a full integration of risk and project management. When we're doing the forecast, we don't just do it. We have to do it and then validate it. So we scrub it, we check it. It goes through different reviews, some of which are listed here, particularly on the annual comprehensive bottom-up. I can't tell you truthfully that a monthly review would go through a non-advocate review or much scrubbing. There's just not enough time. But when you're doing the comprehensive annual bottoms up, you are going to scrub it, you're going to check it, you're going to have people look at it that are experts in that area, make sure that you have a good forecast for the project. This picture is a little tough to look at when you first see it, but the black heavy line going up in steps is the funding for our project. So funding in this case comes incrementally, comes in steps. Our original plan, the blue line, you can see we made sure that the blue line was always below the funding. So we didn't need all of that funding. If our plan had gone according to plan, funding would have been adequate. We're all happy. When we reach time now, we make a new forecast, the dotted red line. You can see that dotted red line in this case is telling us if we spend along that line, we're going to exceed the available funding. So this is one of the outputs or one of the uses for the estimate to complete, making sure that we are aware of the funding needs, whether we have to go to the bank and get money ourselves or our customer has to provide additional funding. So this is done every month. and we're always comparing the future costs to the future funding to make sure we're okay. We also look at how we're doing. So there's two measures here. One says my efficiency to date in spending is such that for every dollar you paid me, I've given you 87.5 cents worth of work. So I'm 87.5% efficient. But in the future, I'm turning over a new leaf. And from here on out, for every dollar you give me, I'm going to give you 93 cents worth of work. So past efficiency, looking in the rearview mirror, future efficiency, judging whether you can really be that efficient to make that forecast. So these are key measures for our earned value system. What we do with them is we use them to make we use them for a lot of things, but one of the uses is automated projections of outcomes. So again, it's a little tough to read this chart, but I'm going to tell you what it says. If you look down the numbers column, to date, this project has been 90% efficient on spending. This project is telling me that from here on to the end, it's going to be 103% efficient. There's going to be a 10% increase in efficiency. Right now, they're $741,000 overrun at complete based on their forecast. And when I run the checks, those items in blue, based on if they could do the rest of the project the way they did last month, if they did the rest of the project the way they did in the last 3 months, the last 6 months, cum to date, in no case does their forecast of $83,255,000 fit with any of these calculated outcomes. Therefore, it is suspect, highly suspect for two reasons. It doesn't fit anywhere in my boundary limits, and there's a jump in efficiency from 90 to 103%, which has always been deemed unrealistic. So this is one of the final things that happens to the forecast. We prepare it, and then we test it. We test the realism of it. If it fails this test, we dig deeper, dive deeper, and try to generate what we think is a more accurate forecast.
All right, thank you, Paul. I think that last slide really showed the power of a robust approach to forecasting and what it can deliver in terms of effective project management. Just to wrap up, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Unanet, I want to give you a very brief overview. As Paul showed on an earlier slide, an earned value management system comprises policies, procedures, but also tools to help support. Unanet is purpose-built for professional services firms and government contractors to act as the feeding of, the cost collection, procurement, finance, and billing, and feeding those out. And so in supporting of people managing their projects, Unanet is supporting planning, executing, monitoring, invoicing, and accounting. So as an example of an earned value engine that Paul had mentioned, EVMS for Project, this is a partner organization we've worked with, a number of our customers have adopted. It supports all the needs for projects. It includes a lot of reporting, and as Paul indicated, there's additional analytical capability through third parties as well if you want to use it. It does also integrate with the various scheduling tools that people might look to adopt. So as I say, a number of our Unanet customers who've looked to address the formal EIA-748 requirements because of contract demands have used Unanet as the feeder system for project and been very successful, and actually working with Humphreys in terms of providing the advisory consulting services to get them up and running too. So now would be a great time to spend any questions if you have. And while we're waiting for that, I just want to provide a sort of public service announcement, as it were. We do a survey every year with a leading advisory firm, Cohn-Resnick, and we're getting ready for our 4th annual benchmarking survey. We'd really encourage you to visit the link there shown, unanet.com/gauge, and complete the survey and provide insights so we can then share with the community. It's all anonymous. And also, if you want to take a look at the last year's report, which is full of metrics and trends to help you manage your business, you can get that from our website homepage too. Just download the 2019 survey. So if you have any questions, please submit them. If not, we're okay. If you please want to reach out to us after the event, you can reach out to me, rhayden@unanet.com, or paul.bollinger@humphreysassociates.com. suggest I don't think we have any urgent questions. Is that right?
I don't see any right now.
All right. Well, if that's the case, we'll give you folks some of your time back. Thank you very much for your attention. There's a lot of great content in here. We hope you find it useful, and please do follow up with us if you want to hear any more. Thank you.